He shuffled along the cracked pavement, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of years and memories. The city lights gleamed off storefront windows, reflecting back a man more comfortable in moonlit desert camps than urban sidewalks. His security jacket, threadbare and faded, bore a name that many here found impossible to place within its decades-old borders: Edward Jameson. Two uniformed officers advanced toward him, feet echoing against concrete like growing threats. "Evening, sir," one called, voice polite but distant. The words carried undercurrents of doubt, as though they piled suspicion onto his stoop of age. Jameson stopped mid-step, craning his neck to meet their eyes. His gaze was steady, as still as desert. Dunes carved by silent winds. The taller officer pulled out a flashlight, its beam cutting through gathered shadows. "Mind telling us why you're wandering after curfew?" Jameson unfurled a small leather wallet, thumb pressing against a faded brass clasp. He produced an ID card printed years ago, bearing a photograph of a younger man with stern features and unyielding gaze. The letters beneath read, "U.S. Navy Commander." The second officer scoffed, stepping closer until the brim of his cap nearly touched Jameson's forehead. "Commander of what, Grandpa? A retirement home chess club?" A titter of laughter escaped the younger constable. He waved the card casually as though flapping a dead leaf. Jameson's lips pressed into a thin line. He said nothing. The silence thickened, folding around the harsh glow of patrol lights. His posture never shifted. Hands, knuckles knobby and worn, gripped the edges of his jacket. They bore the subtle tremor of suppressed anger, tempered by decades of discipline. The first officer sighed, exchanging a glance with his partner. "ID says here you served overseas. When? Vietnam." He smirked before the words left lips. Jameson's head tilted slightly, as if recognizing a distant echo. He offered no confirmation. The younger officer found this maddening, like chasing a ghost wearing a uniform. "War stories can wait," Jameson finally said, voice rough as gravel. "I'm heading home." "For real?" Laughter bristled between them. "Home's 2 blocks that way." The taller man nudged Jameson toward a row of brownstones. "Don't want you getting lost, though." Jameson slipped the ID back into his wallet with deliberate slowness. He closed the clasp and folded the leather. The action signaled like the closing of a book with brittle pages. He lifted his chin, eyes holding theirs with such unwavering calm that both officers blinked in unison. A pale gust of wind rattled fallen leaves across the sidewalk, carrying the faint scent of gunpowder and sage. Before another jibe could form, the distant rumble of engines fractured the night's tension. Headlights appeared, synchronized in a row. In their glare, 4 black SUVs rolled to a stop beside the patrol car. Doors opened in cadence, and figures spilled onto the pavement clad in fatigues. Helmets bore markings they recognized, hoped to see again. SEAL Team. The taller officer straightened, spine rigid as he watched trained shadows flank their old suspect. The younger one paled, stepping back as seasoned operators assessed the scene with precision. Commander Jameson stood poised between 2 worlds, one of ridicule and one of unquestioned authority. He didn't move. He didn't speak. An unfamiliar voice cracked across the hush. "Commander Jameson, permission to escort to secure location." 2 operators flanked Jameson, arms ready but respectful distance maintained. The officers collapsed into stunned relief. Their mocking smiles had vanished. In their place, eyes widened with recognition and regret. He tucked away his vest and zipped his wallet. The SEAL operator offered an arm, and Jameson accepted with a nod. As they disappeared into the row of SUVs, the patrol car's siren blinked uselessly. The sidewalk lay empty, marked only by lingering echoes of a man they once underestimated. The interrogation room was harsh and antiseptic. Its walls painted a bland grey that seemed to absorb any warmth the night air might have carried. Commander Jameson sat at the metal table under a flickering fluorescent bulb, its hum punctuating the silence like a distant artillery fire. Across from him, the two patrol officers from the sidewalk stop and a lieutenant from regional command, clustered, each with file folders and coffee cups that sweated condensation onto papers. The taller officer shuffled through a stack of documents as if hoping to find in them a reason to justify this encounter. Jameson's eyes remained steady. He reached into his jacket pocket and extracted the ID once more. Its plastic edges softened by years of handling. He placed it slowly on the table, the name and rank staring back as though challenging anyone to dispute its truth. "My service never retires," he replied, voice calm as a still pond. "And this credential is valid." The lieutenant leaned forward, brow furrowed. "We ran your serial number," he said, tapping on a tablet. "It comes back inactive, decommissioned. These badges expire, Commander. It's protocol." He paused, offering a smug smile. "Anyone can forge a military card." Jameson opened a worn leather journal, placing it beside the ID. Its pages were filled with neat handwriting and diagrams of ocean currents, covert landing zones, and dates that spanned decades. He flipped to a bookmarked page, sliding the journal across the table so the officers could see entries matching training exercises they'd never heard of. "Not forged," he said. "Documented." The younger officer glanced at the notes, then back at Jameson's face. "These look like ramblings, war stories from Uncle Eddie," he scoffed. "What's this?" He jabbed a finger at a column of numbers. "Coordinates?" Jameson traced the numbers with a finger, voice low. "Coordinates for a submarine. Rendezvous off the coast of Pakistan 2003. A mission that never appeared in public logs, part of Operation Silent Spear." He lifted his gaze. "Ask any retired SEAL." The lieutenant's face flickered, doubt creeping in. "You expect us to believe you led clandestine missions no one verified?" he asked. "Why come back now, using this card?" Jameson closed the journal and folded his hands. "Because it still matters," he said. "Tonight's breach was no random glitch. Someone tested our defenses, and I responded as my duty. Demands." The officers exchanged uneasy looks. The lieutenant cleared his throat. "We'll need to verify," he said. "But until then, you'll remain here." He reached for handcuffs. Jameson leaned back, posture unbroken. "Cuff me if it helps you believe," he said. "But understand this. Real threats don't wait for permission." A low rumble shook the room as distant engines slowed. Through the glass observation window, silhouettes moved swiftly. Navy SEALs emerged again, boots silent on the linoleum. The lieutenant froze, eyes widening. The younger officer swallowed hard. I'll call it in." He rushed out, leaving his notebook behind. Jameson exhaled slowly, the fluorescent hum seeming less oppressive. The opaque door clicked and SEALs entered, nodding respectfully. One of them placed a folder on Jameson's journal, the insignia unmistakable. "Sir, mission debrief and new orders." The operator's voice carried the weight of unquestioned authority. Jameson closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, meeting the SEAL's gaze. "Then let's get to work," he said. The fluorescent light steadied, its flicker stilled, as if acknowledging that some truths are beyond doubt. But in that room, under unflattering light, something fundamental had shifted. The badge was more than plastic, the journal more than pages. It was proof that experience endures beyond paperwork. And for the officers who doubted, the arrival of SEAL Team 6 was both vindication and caution. Respect, they learned, is never optional. Their lesson was indelible. The precinct's break room felt tighter than usual, as though the walls absorbed the uneasy energy between cups clinking and low chatter. The two patrol officers from before sat at a corner table, uniforms pressed but shoulders slumped. They stared at a discarded coffee stirrer, avoiding each other's gaze. Earlier laughter, once brash and self-assured, was stifled now by a shared dread that their jokes at Jameson's expense had crossed an unseen line. "You think he heard us?" the younger one asked, voice barely above the hum of the vending machine. His partner rolled a paper cup in small circles, as if measuring guilt in its swirls. "Does it matter? He's locked up until someone drags that SEAL team off him." The taller officer leaned back, eyes flicking to the clock's digital glow. "He's not locked, not really. They're consulting command." He shook his head. "I still can't believe we nearly cuffed a decorated war hero because we thought it was a prank." A laugh bubbled up, brittle and uneasy. "I mean, a commander with a faded jacket and a notebook? It felt like a setup." He rubbed his forehead. "I considered asking for credentials twice." They fell silent, guilt pooling in shared space. The older shift lieutenant entered, bearing a file stamped "Restricted." His face was a mask, mouth a straight line. He dropped the file on the table without a word and walked away. The taller officer flipped it open, eyes widening at the first page. Photographs showed Jameson in combat gear, medals lining chests of uniform. Debrief notes described covert operations that read like legends. "Jesus," the young officer whispered, "this is all him." A map of training grounds followed, with his handwriting matching the journal they'd seen. The lieutenant's voice crackled over the radio from the hallway. "Report to Internal Affairs. Now." The two officers exchanged looks that said more than words. They knew they'd be questioned not just about the incident, but about their attitudes, their mockery. The break room door hissed closed behind them as they moved in unison toward accountability. Meanwhile, Jameson's reputation rippled beyond. Precinct walls. Rumors spread through the city's underground networks, veteran forums, community boards, social feeds. Some hailed him as Ghost Commander, others as a myth awakened. Articles appeared that very day. Waiting at the gate. Jameson's vigilance saves Academy. Commenters debated how many intrusions would have cost lives if left to newbies. Back at the station, the two officers sat across a stern-faced investigator. He placed a single mug of coffee between them and folded his hands. "Walk me through your interaction," he began. Each word felt like a sentence pronounced in a packed courtroom. The younger officer flushed, recounting every detail, admitting every sneer. The taller officer added his own regrets, noting how Jameson had answered every jibe with silence and dignity. By the end, the investigator closed the file. "Your conduct will be reviewed. Baghdad to Benghazi to Boston doesn't grant anyone license to humiliate a veteran." He paused, then looked each man in the eye. "Consider this a lesson. The measure of a man lies beneath the badge he once wore, not the one you issue today." As they left the room, the younger officer paused at the door, turning back. "Sir," he said quietly, "thank you for reminding us." The investigator watched them go, expression unreadable. Outside, night had fallen. A lone street lamp cast a halo on damp sidewalk. Somewhere, far away, Jameson was moving under quieter lights, a notebook at his side and purpose in his steps. And as dawn approached, those who thought silence was weakness learned it was the calm before decisive action. They would never again dismiss a quiet, ever unwavering watchman. The morning sun crept across the academy grounds as Arya approached the west gate. A fresh sign now crowned the weathered post, Jameson Post. Beneath the bold letters, a smaller plaque read, "Edward Jameson, U.S. Navy Commander, retired." She paused, hand hovering over the latch, and glanced down at the open notebook resting on the ledge. It was his journal, the one that had traveled from clandestine missions to stolen perimeters, and someone had placed it there overnight. She lifted the leather cover, its edges softened by decades of handling. Faint cursive traced the inside front. "Edward Jameson, followed by a line scraped nearly illegible. The name was simple yet powerful, a reminder that every story begins with a name. Arya turned the page. The first entry read, "Dawn reveals what darkness hides. Today I watch the line." Below it, a rough sketch mapped the entire fence line, each post and sensor marked with tiny symbols. In the margin, a note in faded ink: "Trust what you see, question what you do not." A breeze stirred the pages, and Arya's eyes caught a second entry dated exactly 1 week earlier. "Drift of the wind at 0300, 4 beats, not 3. A pattern repeats." She traced the words with her finger and imagined him standing here, silent under the stars, listening. Each observation was precise, purposeful, evidence of a mind that spoke in watchful moments rather than loud commands. Behind her, cadets began their morning drills, salute flags snapping in the breeze. Arya closed the journal gently and tucked it under her arm. She pressed her palm to the plaque, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingers. Edward Jameson was no longer invisible. His name and handwritten truths had given him a voice louder than any salute or uniform stripe. By midday, the Academy's main hall was filled for a special briefing. General Langston stepped to the podium, pausing before a projected image of Jameson's journal page. "Edward Jameson spent 30 years in silent service," she began. "He taught us that vigilance isn't born of orders, but of observation." She clicked to a photograph. Commander Jameson standing in full gear beside the SEAL emblem. Murmurs rippled through the room as cadets realized the full measure of the man they had dismissed. That evening, Arya returned to Jameson Post. She slipped the journal back onto the ledge, but not before adding her own note to the blank margin at the back. "Respect is earned by silence and revealed by action." "Thank you, Commander." She stepped back, letting the pages fall closed, and slid the gate open with newfound purpose. As she moved on, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the Academy. But the name on the plaque and the journals, quiet wisdom remained, a testament that true leadership needs neither applause nor air. It needs only a name, a story, and the courage to write it. Arya paused outside the gatehouse at dawn, watching Commander Jameson tighten a loose screw on the keypad. The soft morning light caught lines on his weathered face, and she noticed something for the first time. Faint but jagged scars streaking beneath his jacket sleeves and along his forearms. They were half hidden by the neat folds of his uniform, but visible enough to tell a story of pain. She hesitated, unease and curiosity mingling as she approached. He glanced up, nodding her forward. She stood beside him. "Your skin," she began, voice low. He set it aside, folding his notebook. "Storm wounds," he said flatly, then turned back to the latch. Arya watched him work, noticing how each movement bore a careful tension. Years of service and survival lay beneath that calm exterior, each scar an echo of a battle fought far away. At the morning briefing in the hall, Arya found her gaze wandering, back to the image of Jameson projected on screen. The dots of light highlighted the ridges on his arms in the photograph, battlefield reminders of shrapnel, of near-fatal burns, of nights spent under fire. The general's voice droned about vigilance and protocols, but Arya struggled to focus. Her mind traced a path between those scars and the silent guardian who had saved them. After drills, she slipped back to the gatehouse with a cup of coffee. Jameson accepted it with a nod, wrapping his hands around the warm paper. He flicked the lid open and took a sip, eyes lost in memories. Arya waited, sensing a chance to understand more. "When did you get these?" she asked. He exhaled, shifting his gaze to the rising sun. "Operation Black Tide, year 1999, Somali coast. We were too close to the shoreline. When the suicide skiff hit," he paused, lifting a sleeve slightly. "The scar was a delicate white thread through olive skin. I was lucky. Many were not." The weight of his words settled between them like a dark cloud. She swallowed, handing him another sip. "I had no idea," she said softly. "No one does." He nodded. "Invisible wounds can be more dangerous than visible ones. They change how you see threats." He lifted his notebook, flipping to a page of jagged diagrams. "This map here notes radar blind spots. Not all dangers announce themselves." Arya returned to the academy's corridors, noticing other veterans in cadet ranks eyeing her with respect. She realized Jameson's scars were badges of a past they didn't mention, reminders that courage truly often leaves marks unseen. That afternoon, she found the general's assistant in the records room. "Can I review Commander Jameson's service logs?" she asked. A quiet nod allowed her inside. Rows of files unfurled Jameson's decorated career, medals for valor, commendations for covert operations, letters from presidents that spoke of sacrifice. The next day, during a security drill exercise, the alarm on the eastern fence malfunctioned. Cadets scrambled, but Jameson froze, sight narrowing. He crouched along the fence, feeling metal edges, assessing disparity between sensor reads and sound. A 2-inch tear in the mesh, thin but enough for a small explosive device. Arya saw him circle it, marking the spot in his notebook. His fingers trembled slightly, but he signaled calmly. "Evacuate the area," he said. Later in the debrief, the general addressed the cadets. "Commander Jameson's scars tell a story of sacrifice and vigilance." She gestured to a photo of him, sleeve rolled. "These wounds saved this academy." Arya stood taller, understanding that scars, seen or hidden, carry lessons in valor no badge can proclaim. That evening, Arya placed coffee and a healing balm near his gate. He noticed and offered a rare smile. "Thank you," he said. She understood then, caring for the unseen. Scars was another way of honoring those who bear them. Silence draped the academy like a heavy cloak as the digital clock on the security console glowed Joe 0.02. Most cadets slept, officers rested, and the generator hummed its steady drone. Commander Jameson sat at his desk, notebook open, reviewing. Notes on perimeter sensors and recent irregularities. He traced the margins with worn fingers, eyes flicking to the fence camera feeds in tight quadrants. The midnight air was cold and still, yet beneath its calm, something lingered, an unsettled pulse he had sensed in his bones. A sudden beep shattered the stillness. A red light blinked on the console beside an alert tone. Southeast quadrant. The alarm had been silent before. His heart quickened, not from fear but from readiness, born of years patrolling shadows. He rose without hesitation, stepping from the booth into moonlit corridors. Each footstep was a promise of action, every breath measured. He pulled on a heavy coat over his uniform, its pockets housing tools, a flashlight and his journal. Slipping outside, he paused, listening. Something moved beyond the fence. The southeast fence shimmered under a floodlight as Jameson approached. He crouched, examining the ground for disturbance. His flashlight beam revealed fresh footprints pressed into mud, paired tracks spaced precisely. He recognized the cadence of movement, two intruders moving with discipline, not random trespassers. He ran a gloved hand along the fence, finding a cut sensor wire expertly severed. This was more than a test. It was reconnaissance. He clicked his radio. "Jameson to command. Possible hostile surveillance in southeast quadrant. Request immediate response." His voice was calm, but firm. Static crackled, then silence. The radio's range was compromised by the breach. He knew better than to wait. He marked the location in his notebook with a precise timestamp and sketched the pattern of footprints. Then he moved swiftly, pacing the fence line toward the next camera post. He bypassed patrol routes he had charted for drills and followed a path of least resistance. At the main gate, he found Lieutenant Carter barking orders at new security. "Staff, They fumbled with radio channels and flashlights, confusion fraying their voices. Jameson stepped forward. Radius on grid 5 to 7. Sensor wires are compromised. Focus there. His tone brooked no argument. Carter stiffened, eyes narrowing. And who appointed you? Jameson raised a hand. My duty, he said quietly. I hold it at every hour. He retrieved wire cutters and signal clamps from his pockets, repairing the first sensor in seconds. Cadets gathered, watching him work as one. Carter glanced around, momentarily silenced by the automatic nods Jameson received. The repaired sensor flickered green. The quiet returned, but tension crackled in the air. Jameson led a small team. Along the fence, each move precise, they found a second breach near a service entrance. While others hesitated, Jameson unclipped a toolkit and secured the panel. He explained each step, his voice a steady guide. The team listened and learned. By 0030, every vulnerable point was sealed, and the floodlights illuminated intact fences. He closed his notebook, noting the final entry. Midnight reconnaissance confirmed, repairs complete, recommend updated protocols and overnight shifts. He handed the journal to Carter. Read this. Experience speaks in pages you haven't opened. Carter took the journal, fingers trembling. He met Jameson's gaze with reluctant respect. Outside, the horizon shimmered. He felt the weight of history, aware that unseen dangers test our readiness at the dead of night. In that moment, he was reminded why he returned, to serve beyond recognition, to guard the line between safety and ruin. His vigil continued steadfastly. The low rumble of engines rolled across the asphalt as 4 black SUVs slid into the academy courtyard just before dawn. Commander Jameson stood at the edge of the drill yard, notebook held at his side, watching the silhouettes emerge under floodlights. He glanced once at the eastern fence, then lifted his chin to acknowledge the newcomers. The rear doors of the lead vehicle swung open, and men in full combat gear stepped onto the pavement, rifles slung, helmets gleaming. Their sealed trident patches caught the light like silent badges of legend. The team leader moved forward with measured strides, boots clicking against concrete. He was younger than Jameson, but carried himself with a certainty that only comes from countless missions. "Commander Jameson?" he called, voice calm and respectful. Jameson nodded. "Lieutenant Harper, SEAL Team 6. We received your midnight alert and current breach assessments." Harper produced a tablet displaying Jameson's journal sketches and timestamps. The pages matched the digital entries side by side, proof that these lines of ink were as tactical as any military directive. Harper's second nodded toward the perimeter. "We're here to secure any further incursions and assist in hardening the point defenses." Jameson folded his notebook closed. "Then let's begin." He led them to the southeast quadrant where the first sensor was severed. Under his direction, a SEAL operator knelt and inspected the cut wire. Harper watched as Jameson explained the flaw in the automated backup's routing, pointing to a microscopic misalignment in the conduit. The SEAL team moved with efficiency. Lights hung, cables reconfigured, sensors tested, while Jameson took notes in shorthand, documenting each improvement. Word spread quickly among cadets and security staff. The courtyard hummed with quiet awe as trainee officers paused their morning formations to watch. No shouts or orders passed, only the rhythmic tap of boots and the occasional muttered affirmation as SEALs followed Jameson's lead. When a stray cable snapped under a tool's torque, Jameson bent without hesitation, steadying the team's work. A SEAL shot him a grateful glance, remembering that experience often outweighs youth in critical moments. By the time dawn's pale light spilled over the barracks rooftops, every vulnerable access point had been fortified. Portable floodlights flicked off, and the SUV's headlights dimmed as Harper approached Jameson again. "Sir, your observations saved us hours of troubleshooting," he said. Your notebook is a blueprint for future protocols." Jameson met the compliment with a simple nod. "Then it's time to integrate these lessons into regular drills." Harper extended his hand. "Permission to return to base and request that we remain on call." Jameson clasped it firmly. "Granted, but keep your comms open. I'll signal if anything changes." The SEALs filed back into their vehicles, their presence fading into the morning haze as quietly as they had arrived. Jameson watched them go, inhaling the crisp air. The academy grounds felt different now, more secure and more alive. Cadets resumed drills with fresh purpose, officers exchanged approving nods, and even Lieutenant Carter lingered by the fence, reading Jameson's journal entries taped to the sensor conduit. As the SUVs turned away, the commander made a final note. SEAL Team 6 deployed, perimeter secured, integration underway. He closed his journal with a measured snap and tucked it into his coat. Then, without fanfare, he crossed the courtyard, toward the gatehouse, ready once more to guard the line. The arrival of elite warriors had underscored a truth he had always known. Silent vigilance, when combined with decisive action, changes everything. The academy settled into an uneasy lull as afternoon shadows lengthened across the parade ground. Commander Jameson moved quietly between patrol points, notebook tucked inside his coat, eyes scanning the horizon. A distant thunderhead gathered just beyond the western ridge, its dark belly mirroring the tension that had settled over Worthington. Cadets paused in their drills, glancing up at the sky, then back at each other, sensing something unspoken. Inside the gatehouse, the glow of computer screens cast pale light onto charts and schematics taped to the walls. Lieutenant Carter stood before them, brow furrowed, tracing routes of previous breaches. He had grown accustomed to Jameson's silent presence beside him, offering corrections with a subtle nod rather than directives. Now, though, the lieutenant felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders more heavily than any rank. He tapped a finger along the lines on a sensor map, then straightened and closed the file. "Let's run a full system check," he said into the quiet. Outside, Jameson paused at the northeast quadrant. He knelt by an access panel, inspecting the newly installed sensor housing. In his journal, he had annotated the optimal placement of conduits, but even the most carefully planned defenses strained under the calm before a storm. He ran a gloved hand along the metal casing, listening for subtle vibrations in the soil. A faint, irregular pulse. He noted the exact coordinates, then rose to his feet as a rumble of distant thunder rolled overhead. In the mess hall, cadets gathered over late dinner, voices hushed. News of SEAL Team 6's assistance had spread, but equally strong was the memory of the recent intrusions. Every clatter of a dropped spoon seemed to echo threat. Arya sat with a group of peers, journal pages spread before her as she reviewed. His sketches, others joined, tracing lines with careful fingers. They whispered questions about sensor sensitivity and perimeter gaps. No one spoke of fear. Instead, they sought understanding, determined to learn from Jameson's watchful example. High above the academy, storm clouds loomed. A gust of wind rattled window panes as officers returned to the control room. The rain held back for now, as if waiting for a signal. Jameson re-entered the booth, pages of his journal open to the night's warnings. He tapped a notation. Atmospheric interference. May delay alerts. Human vigilance becomes paramount. He closed the book and looked at Carter, who met his gaze with newfound respect. Outside, the first drops began to fall, soft as a whisper. Lights along the fence flickered as power lines groaned under the strain of rising wind. Cadets paused, mid-step on the parade ground, eyes turning toward the storm. In that suspended moment, silence carried more weight than any alarm. Jameson stepped to the window, notebook in hand, and watched the sky erupt in silent flashes. He drew a deep breath, feeling the calm in his bones. Tonight, when the storm broke, Vigilance would stand between safety and chaos. And in that silence, before the storm, he prepared once more to guard what others could not see coming. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes in the guard booth, and Jameson closed his journal with a soft snap. Outside, cadets tightened grip on rifles, their breaths visible in the crisp evening air. For a moment, everything felt familiar. The low light, the hush before action, the tension coiled like a spring. Memories, sharp and vivid, pulled him back to the rugged mountains of Afghanistan, where each shadow might conceal an enemy, and every footfall could trigger disaster. He remembered the salt flats under a blood-orange dawn, shifting sands that hid IEDs planted by unseen adversaries. He had knelt there for hours, scanning the ground with a borrowed lens, coaxing meaning from each grain of earth. Tonight's perimeter cracks echoed that same fragility. The Academy's fence line, though fortified, was still just a thin barrier between security and chaos, much like the flimsy barriers they'd erected around remote outposts. He rose and stepped outside, boots crunching on gravel. Patrol lights swept past in a lazy arc. He recalled crouching behind a berm with his team, heart pounding as a distant mortar hissed overhead. The smell of cordite lingered on his uniform for days, a ghost caught in fabric. Here he smelled rain and ozone, but the pulse of threat remained, an undercurrent linking then and now. At the southeast quadrant, he crouched beside a marker, an Afghan rock piled on a hasty trench, and drew a parallel. His finger traced the cold metal of a sensor, just as it had stroked the rusted edge of an unexploded shell in Kandahar. That shell had blown apart 3 men, leaving him with scars that still throbbed when storms gathered. Here, too, metal bore witness to hidden danger, and he felt the same surge of determination to protect those who could not see what he saw. He flipped open to a journal entry dated 15 years earlier. "Tomorrow, we move at first light. Trust only what your eyes confirm." He compared it to tonight's margin note, confirm with sound, not light. Darkness deceives. He closed the book and pocketed it. Knowledge gleaned from harsh terrain had taught him not to rely solely on instruments. Now he would walk the line by hand, feel for anomalies, listen for irregular echoes, just as he once had in hostile valleys. The distant rumble of thunder echoed mortar fire in his mind, and he allowed himself a brief flash of adrenaline. Cadets gathered behind him, flashlights in hand, eyes wide but trusting his lead. He guided them methodically, instructing in measured whispers: check conduits, press panels, test backup batteries. Each command was a lesson distilled from combat, transmitted across a gulf of time and purpose. By midnight, every breach point was reinforced. The storm broke overhead, rain hammering the metal roof in relentless rhythm. Under the downpour, Jameson stood firm as cadets scurried to secure equipment. He closed his eyes, feeling rain sting. Broken skin and cold bit into old scars. He felt alive in that moment, not as a relic of another war, but as a sentinel whose past forged the safety of this night. When the final bolt was secured, he nodded to the cadets and turned back to the booth. In the console's glow, he recorded a simple entry: "Echoes of Afghanistan guided tonight's defense. Vigilance honed in war still saves lives here." He closed his journal and exhaled, aware that every echo of his past had found purpose. In the present, the morning briefing felt different. In the cavernous hall, rows of cadets sat at attention, faces illuminated by early sunlight filtering through high windows. At the front, Lieutenant Carter cleared his throat, adjusting his crisp uniform. He held a printed report, the latest perimeter audit, and looked toward Commander Jameson, who stood just to the side, notebook in hand. In previous days, Carter might have opened the meeting with a commanding tone, but now he paused, meeting Jameson's steady gaze before speaking. Cadets, yesterday's drill incorporated revisions from Commander Jameson's protocols, Carter began. His voice carried respect rather than authority. As he recited bullet points, improved sweep intervals, enhanced sensor redundancy, Jameson tapped notes into his journal, but did not interject. The shift in power was evident. Carter presented Jameson's recommendations as doctrine, acknowledging their origin with a nod. Cadets murmured approval, exchanging excited glances. They had come to trust the man who once stood unseen at the gate. After the briefing, Carter led Jameson to the control room, where blueprints of the campus glowed on wall-mounted screens. Junior officers hovered nearby, awaiting direction. Carter placed the audit on the console and pointed to a blinking node. "Tomorrow, we integrate the secondary patrol routes you outlined," he said. "I want your input on timing." He paused, then added, "If you don't mind leading the recon." Jameson met his gaze calmly. "Of course." He stepped forward, and the officers parted, giving him space as though he wore rank equal to any commissioned officer. Carter watched him go, shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks, relieved to share responsibility with a veteran whose experience surpassed any manual. Outside, Arya and a small team gathered under Jameson's direction, clipboards in hand. He had drawn new patrol grids on a temporary map, dividing the grounds into quadrants that balanced coverage and response time. As he explained each sector, trainees asked incisive questions about terrain features and sensor blind spots. Jameson answered patiently, drawing on years of operations where every detail mattered. When a cadet suggested a route alteration near the maintenance shed, he smiled. "Good catch. Adjust here," he agreed, erasing and redrawing a line. That afternoon, Carter observed from the control room, monitoring live feeds as patrols implemented the new routes. Cameras tracked cadets moving smoothly along Jameson's grid. Carter tapped a finger against his desk. "They're running perfect. Lapse. Response times improved by 30%, he reported to a desk officer. The officer smiled. "Commander Jameson's plan is proving effective." Back at the gatehouse, Jameson closed his journal and folded his coat. Carter appeared, holding 2 coffees. He handed one over. "I owe you," he said softly. Jameson accepted it with a nod. Carter continued quietly. "I underestimated the value of experience. Thank you for stepping up." The unspoken words between them carried more weight than any salute. As dusk settled, Jameson returned to the booth, coffee warming his hands. Outside, cadets on patrol passed with lifted chins and clear eyes. They no longer saw just a gate guard. They saw a leader who shaped their security. Carter remained at his side now, deferring to Jameson's expertise. The shift in power was complete. Honor transferred not by stripes or rank, but by earned respect. And as night fell over Worthington Academy, the silent sentinel at the gate knew that true authority comes from action, not position. The training yard filled with acrid smoke as flashbangs detonated in rapid succession, their staccato bangs rattling bones and blinding senses. Cadets stumbled through the haze, rifles raised but eyes wild with confusion. Alarms wailed, mingling, with shouting orders that seemed to dissolve in the dense grey swirl. Commander Jameson moved through the chaos like a wraith, voice cutting through noise even when unheard. He reached the first disoriented group, grasped a shoulder, and guided them toward cover against a low concrete wall. "Stay low. Watch your corners," he murmured, more felt than heard. His calm presence gave them something solid to follow. A second flashbang erupted nearby, knocking one cadet off his feet. Jameson dropped beside him, yanking him up by the collar and dragging him to safety. He scanned the yard, noting every obstacle, every possible blind spot. In his journal, he had drawn the exact lines of sight, marked where smoke would pool and where echoes would deceive. Now, in real time, he applied those notes with surgical precision. A cadet shouted for guidance. Jameson pointed to a cracked doorway leading to an equipment shed. "Through there! Keep moving!" His command was simple, urgent, undeniable. Lieutenant Carter burst onto the scene, eyes watering from the smoke, brow furrowed in alarm. He tried to shout instructions, but his voice vanished in the din. Jameson intercepted him, slipping an arm under Carter's shoulder and steering him toward the shed. Inside, they found a group of cadets huddled in panic. Jameson knelt and spoke each man's name, steadying breaths. "You're trained. Trust your drills." He slapped a magazine into a rifle with a practiced snap, then demonstrated, clearing the doorway step by step. The cadets mirrored him, finding focus amid the storm. When the smoke finally cleared, they emerged blinking into pale daylight. Cadets formed an impromptu line, heads high, shoulders squared. Carter surveyed them, eyes landing on Jameson, who tucked his journal back into his coat. A hush descended. No applause rang out, only a collective intake of breath, a shared recognition of truth. Leadership isn't claimed with rank, but earned in the crucible of action. And in that moment of smoke, flashbangs, and truth, every cadet knew exactly who had saved them. The new security badges gleamed on lanyards in the control room, rows of neon plastic ready for distribution. Lieutenant Carter watched as cadets filed in, exchanging excited glances. Each badge bore a photo, name, rank, and a microchip for access control. But at the front of the table sat one badge, unlike the others. A simple metal disc stamped with an anchor and trident, polished to a mirror shine. Edward Jameson's personal insignia, designed but never worn until now. Carter nodded to Jameson, who approached without haste. His uniform remained unchanged, threadbare jacket, faded name tag, yet the presence he carried filled the room. Cadets paused mid-step, eyes shifting from their new badges to the medal-like disc in his hand. Jameson picked it up, running a thumb over the raised emblem, and slipped it onto a black cord. The metal was cool against his skin, a reminder of battles fought and lessons learned. A hush fell as he spoke. "This badge is unmatched," he said, voice steady, "not because of its metal, but because of the duty it represents." He moved among the cadets, meeting each gaze. "Your badges grant you access to doors and servers. Mine grants access to responsibility, to see what others miss, to act without waiting for permission." He paused by a young officer still marveling at the microchip embedded in his badge. Jameson tapped the officer's badge gently. "Your chip beeps to confirm identity. My badge reminds me that identity is defined by service, not technology." He stepped back toward Carter, who handed him the stack of standard badges. Jameson inspected one, then placed it deliberately atop the others. "Wear them well," he told the cadets, "but never forget the value beneath the surface." He turned the metal disc in his hand, catching the light in a fleeting glint. A badge. Unmatched doesn't prove superiority. It proves commitment, to watch quietly, to speak decisively, and to protect without fanfare. The cadets looked at their badges with new understanding. No longer mere symbols of rank, they felt like promises. Carter straightened, inspired by Jameson's words. Outside, the afternoon sun caught the edge of the metal disc fluttering at Jameson's chest. The room seemed brighter, as though every badge, matched or unmatched, had just earned its true worth. Night had fallen over the academy as Commander Jameson made his rounds, replacing batteries and testing lights along the west perimeter. Each step echoed against the gravel path, and the only illumination came from dim walkway lamps flickering. Against the darkness, cadets patrolled at intervals, their flashlights creating twin beams that cut through shadows but could not dispel the lurking uncertainties beneath them. Jameson paused beside a sensor panel, noting a slight delay in its response. He knelt, tracing a gloved finger along the wiring before testing it again. The light blinked, once, twice, then steadied, but the hesitation nagged at him. He moved onto the northern fence line. The wind whispered through the trees beyond, carrying with it distant questions unanswered. Who might test our defenses? Next, could a faultless night still mask a threat? He pressed a gloved hand against the chain link, feeling its cold surface. Memories of covert operations surfaced, midnight raids where every unanswered question meant life or death. In those days, hesitating cost comrades their lives. Here, hesitations could cost the academy its sanctity. Ahead, a group of cadets emerged from the shadow of an outbuilding. Their forms flickered in and out of the beams cast by Jameson's flashlight. Arya stepped forward, concern etched on her face. "Sir," she began, voice low, "we found this near the southeast gate." She held out a small, irregularly cut piece of metal. Jameson took it, examining the scrap as though reading a cryptic message. "This came from one of our devices," he murmured. "Looks like someone tampered with the sensor casing." The unspoken question hung between them. Was it stray debris from maintenance or deliberate sabotage? Jameson frowned. "Leave it with me, Cadet Bennett," he said. He pocketed the fragment and returned to the fence, scanning the area with precise movements. Together, they walked the dark expanse, flashlights tracing ghostly patterns. At intervals, Jameson stopped and circled panels, asking Bennett to report any irregularity. Each moment of silence felt charged with potential inquiry. After the patrol, they returned to the booth. Jameson dropped into an old chair, opening his journal to a fresh page. He let the flashlight beam rest on blank lines before writing, "Metal fragment at SE Gate. Check maintenance logs. Verify integrity of all casings." He paused, pen hovering. He glanced at the dark window as though waiting for it to answer itself. Then he scribbled another line. "Questions in the dark lead to truth in the light." Bennett observed quietly. She asked softly, "Do you ever have doubts, sir?" Jameson closed the journal, meeting her gaze. "Doubt keeps us alive," he said. "Certainty blinds us to hidden cracks. Questions are tools, not weaknesses." He folded the journal and handed it to her. "Note every anomaly. Tonight, questions are our best defense." Outside, the wind gusted through the lampposts, causing shadows to dance across the fence. The darkness seemed deeper now, pregnant with possibilities. Jameson rose and retrieved the metal fragment. Under the flashlight, he traced tiny grooves carved into its edge. Sabotage, not accident. He looked at the sleeping campus through the booth window. The questions lingered. Who was responsible, and why choose the dark to conceal intent? In answering those questions, he vowed to bring light where shadows thrived. He replaced the fragment in an evidence pouch marked with time and location. Then he closed the pouch and slipped it into his coat pocket. As he shut the booth door, he switched the lamp to a steady beam, casting a wedge of illumination outward. In the darkness beyond, no answers came. Only questions remained, poised, to guide them through another night of watchful defense. In the stillness, every whisper of wind hinted at secrets. Shifting shadow posed a question. Jameson believed that inquiry forged vigilance. As he resumed his vigil, the unanswered questions sharpened his focus through the darkness. Smoke curled into the night sky as the training yard's mock building burned at one corner, flames licking at broken windows and sending embers swirling through the air. Cadets formed two lines, hose teams on one side and stretcher-bearers on the other, their faces lit by orange light and determination. Commander Jameson stood beside Lieutenant Carter, watching the controlled blaze with a critical eye. Everything was planned, every expected outcome logged in Jameson's notebook, but live fire had a way of reminding even the most prepared that nothing ever went exactly as intended. A sudden flare cracked above the roof, a flashover that exceeded safe parameters. Cadets froze, water hoses quivering, eyes widening as heat intensified. Without hesitation, Jameson sprinted forward, pulling a nearby trainee behind a concrete barrier. "Down!" he yelled, voice cutting through the roar. He dropped to one knee and directed the crew to flank the flames from a different angle, their hoses weaving under his gestures. Carter joined him, positioning cadets at the windward side to prevent the blaze from spreading toward the staging area. Under Jameson's calm command, the teams shifted seamlessly. One group formed a protective arc, another edged closer with blankets to smother smaller fires. The stretcher team crouched ready near an open hatch, anticipating the evacuation of an injured victim. When a burning beam collapsed inward, the coordinated response saved the mock victim within seconds. Cadet Arya Bennett dashed through heat and sparks, dragging the dummy to safety while others formed a human shield of hoses. When the final hiss of retreating embers died, silence fell. Faces that had been tense and uncertain now glowed with shared triumph. Jameson approached, jacket smudged with soot, and nodded at each team member. Carter clapped Cadet's shoulders and offered a rare grin. "Lesson learned," he said. Jameson closed his journal, penning a final note. "Fire reveals character. Trust is forged in crises." As embers cooled, cadets gathered around the burnt-out ruin, linking arms and exchanging relieved laughter. The night's ordeal had tested protocols and wills, but more importantly, it had bound them together. In the flickering glow, they no longer saw a distant mentor or a rigid instructor. They saw a father of tactics and a brother in fire. And when the crews finally dispersed, their boots echoed in unison down the corridor, carrying a new creed. In heat and hazard, they stood as one. He walked into the common room just as the sun slipped behind distant hills, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. Most officers were scattered among tables, tired after long shifts. Lieutenant Carter stood apart, arms crossed, reviewing notes on his tablet. His posture radiated focus rather than fatigue, an attitude that had shifted since Commander Jameson arrived. Carter watched Jameson approach, curly-haired cadet at his side, journal in hand. Something in Jameson's calm vigilance had changed, how Carter saw everything. Jameson settled into the lone armchair by the fireplace, its embers glowing softly. He opened his journal to a bookmarked page, diagrams of emergency lighting zones, and traced a path with his finger. Carter hesitated, then stepped forward. "Sir," he began, voice low, "I wanted to thank you." Jameson looked up, eyes steady and unreadable. Carter swallowed. "You taught us to look beyond protocols, to see the man behind the badge and the danger behind the silence." Jameson closed the journal gently. "Watching isn't enough," he said. "You must act on what you see." Carter nodded, arms uncrossing as he approached the fireplace. He glanced at the cadet, who stepped away respectfully, leaving the two men alone. Carter motioned to the journal. "May I?" Without waiting, he flipped to a page filled with minute sketches of perimeter weak points. "I saw you walk this," posted Dawn, reading wind patterns and soil moisture. "I thought it redundant until the blackout." He paused, recalling the night when Jameson alone navigated the darkness to stop the breach. "I saw how you moved, silent but certain. I realized I'd never paid attention to the details you noted." Carter reached into his pocket and produced a folded photograph. It showed Jameson in uniform decades earlier, medal ribbons gleaming. "I didn't see the man behind the uniform. I saw only a gate guard." He handed the photo across to Jameson. "I want you to have it. A reminder that what we overlook can save lives." Jameson accepted it without surprise. Water from an unseen well of humility glinting in his eyes. He unfolded the photo and placed it beside his journal on the armrest. Carter watched the flames reflect off the medal ribbons. "You deserve this," he said quietly. "Not for your rank, but for opening my eyes." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling window panes like distant echoes of the past. Jameson looked up and met Carter's gaze. "Thank you," he replied. "That means more than any salute." Carter offered a small smile, a rare concession to respect earned rather than demanded. He stepped back and saluted, crisp and sincere. Jameson returned the salute, softer but no less formal. As Carter turned to rejoin his squad, he felt a shift within himself. No longer just an officer following orders, but a leader who truly saw those he led. And in the quiet glow of embers and evening light, he understood that the greatest honor one man could give another was the gift of being seen. The first light of dawn crept over the western ridge as Commander Jameson stood atop the eastern overlook, notebook in hand and eyes fixed on the awakening academy. The air was crisp, each breath a visible wisp that vanished into pale gold. Below, cadets assembled in quiet formation, awaiting instruction. Jameson watched them, sensing that today would bring a truth even he had not foreseen. Lieutenant Carter joined him without announcement, hands folded behind his back. He nodded toward the line of young officers stretching across the yard. "They've never been more attentive," Carter said softly. Jameson did not reply. Instead, he flipped open his journal to the final blank page and held the pen above it, pausing as though factoring in the weight of what he would write. A gentle breeze stirred the pages, and Jameson lowered the pen. "Yesterday's tests confirmed vulnerabilities we thought closed," he said. Dawn light illuminated faint maps drawn across the page. Fence lines, sensor nodes, patrol routes. He traced a route with his finger, one he had walked 3 times during the blackout, but this morning revealed something deeper. He stepped forward, motioning Carter to follow. Together, they descended the overlook steps, boots crunching, on frost-damp gravel. At the gatehouse, cadets formed a corridor, saluting as Jameson passed. Each young face held the question of what came next. He nodded and entered, Carter close behind. Inside, Jameson approached the console, where a single printout lay waiting, logs from overnight drills. He retrieved it and scanned the entries, eyes narrowing as numbers and timestamps aligned. Then he looked at Carter. "Our own drills were used as a template for the intrusion," he said quietly. "Someone studied our exercises as closely as I study the fence." Carter's face drained of color. "You mean they attended drills, learned our patterns?" Jameson nodded. "They were inside the fence house last night, watching." He handed Carter the printout. "Your patrol rota is here, every shift timed. We thought we were testing ourselves. They were testing us." A stunned silence fell. The cadets outside shifted uneasily. Jameson closed his journal with a firm snap. "This changes everything," he said. "Tomorrow we rewrite every pattern, unpredictable sweeps, randomized intervals. We turn our strengths into uncertainty for anyone who would learn them." He looked at Carter. "Trust is built on consistency. Security is built on surprise." Carter exhaled, resolving to adapt. Outside, the sun climbed higher, scattering shadows and revealing a campus poised for transformation. In that dawn revelation, Jameson understood that true defense lay not only in readiness, but in the courage to change. And as officers and cadets watched him prepare new orders, they learned that vigilance must evolve whenever threats do. Late afternoon, sky glowed bruised purple as Commander Jameson stepped into the courtyard where cadets gathered for a demonstration. The air held the tension of anticipation, each breath measured against the promise of action. Cadets shifted in place, eyes flicking between Carter and the gates they practiced securing daily. A hush fell. At the center of the assembled formation stood Lieutenant Carter, boots planted firmly and arms folded. Behind him, a plaque commemorated Jameson's dedication, Jameson Post. 3 officers in civilian attire emerged from behind a nearby shed, carrying mock weapons and moving in tight formation, slipping through a section of fence Carter believed secure. Carter barked orders. "Engage the intruders at that point." Cadets responded, hauling rifles and racing toward the breach. At the fence, intruders halted. One raised a hand and called out, voice exaggerated. "Old man, still stuck in the past. We're just jesting." Laughter rippled through their ranks. Carter's jaw tightened. Cadets hesitated, uncertain whether to fire blanks or lower their weapons. The intruder thrust a hand through the fence where a sensor had been repaired. "Your fancy fixes couldn't stop us." Jameson's expression shifted. He strode forward, notebook in hand, as cadets parted. "They weren't here to train," he said quietly so only Carter could hear. Carter's eyes widened. "Cadets," froze as Jameson raised his voice. "Gentlemen," he called, voice calm yet firm, "your intrusion test is over. Step away from the fence." The mock team froze, surprise etching their faces. The lead intruder's grin faltered. "Sir, this was supposed to be a drill," he stammered. Jameson nodded toward Carter. "Then follow the protocol you rehearsed. Show me your IDs and explain your unauthorized variation." The intruder fumbled, producing a badge that did not match any security credentials. Cadets watched. Carter moved in, face pale. "They didn't inform me," he said, glancing at Jameson. "I thought this was approved." Jameson met his gaze. "Approval comes from adherence to procedure," he said. "Deviations undermine security." He addressed the intruders. "If you wish to test us, follow the right channels or face real consequences." No one laughed. Cadets lowered rifles but stayed alert. The intruders dropped weapons and raised empty hands. Jameson studied their reddened faces. After a tense pause, he motioned Carter forward. "Lieutenant, escort these men to the control room and file an incident report." Carter blinked but obeyed. As the team disappeared behind the drill hall, Jameson addressed the cadets. "Let this be the final mocking of our defenses. Jests and shortcuts do not strengthen security. Discipline, respect for procedure, and vigilance do." A silence, deeper than night, settled over them, filled with understanding. Each young officer absorbed the weight of his words. No one stirred until Carter exhaled, breaking the stillness with a quiet acknowledgement. He closed his notebook with a deliberate click. In that moment, the boundary between instructor and student blurred as they recognized their true sentinel. Not a title on paper, but a guardian who refused complacency. They filed away the lesson in muscle memory, ready to carry it into every watch. The courtyard remained still until Carter stepped to Jameson's side. "You handled that perfectly," he said. Cadets smiled, relief and respect in their eyes. They understood true leadership, not shouts or lectures, but decisive action grounded in authority earned. Courtyard lights flickered on as Jameson tucked his notebook away. He stepped toward the gatehouse, head held high. Behind him, cadets stood taller, certain that mockery ends where earned respect begins. Night guards on rotation paused at the gate, eyes tracing Jameson's retreating figure as if imprinting the lesson into their vigilance. The wind carried a fresh resolve, whispering that no one would ever challenge their boundaries without consequence. The final mocking had passed, and no one would doubt the sentinel at the gate again. That day, Worthington's watch became more than duty. It became a promise no one ever kept. Morning dew lay heavy on the parade ground as cadets formed ranks awaiting inspection. The air carried a chill that brushed against every uniform fold. And in the center of the formation stood Cadet Arya Bennett, eyes fixed on the horizon. Commander Jameson approached the assembled group, his posture erect, notebook tucked under his arm. Behind him walked Lieutenant Carter, shoulders squared in deference rather than command. Today was different. Today called for a stand. Moments. Earlier, a memo had arrived from Regional Command. questioning the Academy's new protocols. It cited tradition, insisting on strict adherence to outdated schedules. Jameson had read it while seated in the gatehouse, brow furrowed, candlelight flickering across his lined face. The memo's tone hinted at punishment for deviation. He refolded the paper carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. He then stepped outside into the night air, breathing deep the scent of pine and winter frost. Now, as the sun rose, he surveyed the rows of cadets with quiet intensity. He raised a hand, signaling Carter to halt. Weapons were slung, attention focused. Jameson cleared his throat, voice steady. "You are here to protect what cannot always speak for itself." His gaze swept across the faces, bright with expectation. "Tonight's protocol will change. We will test our readiness outside the schedules they demand." A murmur rippled through the ranks, but Jameson held his silence, letting anticipation grow. Carter shifted uneasily, eyes meeting his mentor's. Jameson nodded once, conceding trust in his lieutenant. Then he addressed the group. "We move at first light tomorrow to the western ridge. All electronic surveillance will be disabled. No sensors, no cameras, no guarantees, except your watchfulness." A hush fell. Cadets exchanged glances calibrated with both thrill and anxiety. Carter stepped up. "Sir," he asked, "we risk violation of orders." Jameson held out the memo for Carter to see. "I know the cost," he replied, "but honor demands we choose what is right over what is easy." He folded the memo and tucked it into his pocket. Discipline is useless if it silences reason. The formation held. Arya felt her heart pound. Perhaps others felt it too. She recalled the breaches and the lessons about vigilance earned through change rather than stagnation. This was the ultimate test. When doctrine clashed with duty, which would prevail? That afternoon, under fading light, cadets assembled at the ridge. Jameson signaled them to halt, and he tore open his notebook, revealing hastily scrawled instructions. They fanned out across the terrain, eyes scanning the wilderness line where forest met open field. Wind muffled footfalls. Carter kept count of each discrete position. As darkness deepened, a simulated breach began. Without electronic alerts, cadets relied solely on observation, recalling every lesson Jameson had imparted. Gunfire alarms roared to life only when cadets triggered manual switches. Yet it was not alarm which echoed through the night, but the sound of disciplined movement, soft footsteps, whispered commands, careful signals passed from man to man. Hours later, dawn broke across blood-red sky. The exercise concluded. Jameson walked among the exhausted but triumphant cadets. One by one, they offered silent salutes. Carter stepped forward, removing his cap. "Sir, Regional Command will learn of this," he said. "They may not approve." Jameson smiled, placing a hand on Carter's shoulder. "Then they will have a choice. Follow orders without question, or stand for something greater. Honor is tested at the edge of obedience." In the years that followed, the Academy's reputation changed. The night at the ridge became legend, a symbol of integrity that endured long after memos and protocols faded. And at Worthington Military Academy, every watch began with the lesson taught by one veteran guard who chose honor over compliance, and by the cadets brave enough to stand with him. Their stand became a legacy, teaching future guardians that courage demands choosing justice over blind obedience in every critical trial. Rain fell in steady sheets as Commander Jameson stood at the western gate, uniform soaked and heavy. Each drop on his shoulder seemed to carry the weight of past watches. He surveyed the line of cadets before him, each holding a rifle as a promise. Rifles bore droplets that glowed under courtyard lights. Thunder rumbled overhead as though the storm bore witness to their oath. Lieutenant Carter stood beside him, notebook secured under one arm, eyes fixed respectfully on his mentor. He recalled questioning Jameson's methods days before. Now, in the storm, he was grateful for every lesson learned under that watchful gaze. Gates groaned under driving rain, puddles spreading in shifting patterns across cobblestones. A hush settled over the formation. Without words, Jameson raised a gloved hand. Cadets bowed rifles to vertical positions in a single motion. The gesture formed a wall of salute, dark silhouettes against the rain. To outsiders it seemed rehearsed. To them it was a collective vow. Carter felt its weight in his chest. Alone, Cadet emerged at the center. Arya Bennett, cloakless, clutched a folded flag bearing the sealed trident and anchor. She advanced through rain-soaked ground. The flag's stars dimmed in soaked fabric. At Jameson's side, she raised it with both, hands like offering a relic. Their eyes met, sharing the burden of service. Jameson draped the flag over his shoulders, its soaked weight unyielding. He saluted Bennett, tapping his cap's brim and sending a spray of water into the dark. Cadets mirrored him, lowering rifles as resolve rose. Then Jameson spoke, voice steady through the downpour. "In storms and stillness," he said, "we remain steadfast. This salute honors not the uniform, but duty." Lightning crackled overhead, illuminating determined faces. "Let this rain wash away doubt and forge our resolve." Thunder rolled again as water spilled from tents. Cadets moved to secure gear, but Jameson raised a finger. "This is our trial." A flash revealed the fence line flanked by sensor, lamps like distant stars. No breach alarm sounded. The storm had sharpened their watch. Carter stepped forward, hand on Jameson's shoulder. "They are ready," he said. Jameson nodded, folding the flag and tucking it into his coat. He scanned the cadets, their uniforms dark, posture unwavering. Back in the gatehouse, Jameson retrieved his journal and recorded precise observations, salutes executed under rain, morale unaffected, sensors holding steady. Each entry was a testament to training that embraced unpredictability. He paused, closing the leather cover and feeling the worn binding steady under his palm. His flashlight beam traced droplets on its cover, then shifted outward to the now quiet yard. Outside, lightning flickered again, illuminating the wet courtyard like a sudden revelation. Footsteps echoed as cadets returned to their quarters, boots sloshing through the waterlogged stones. Their silhouettes flickered in the intermittent flashes, each stride carrying a new confidence born of elemental test. Carter entered beside him, carrying a steaming mug of coffee. "A small comfort after a trial," he said. Jameson smiled faintly, fingers brushing the rim. "Comfort earned," he replied. He reflected on how far they had come. From mocking, his silence to soldiers unafraid of rain. Raindrops underscored lessons in vigilance and respect. He thought of Arya's gaze and knew that this night's story would echo. As dawn approached, rain let up to a gentle drizzle. Cadets formed one. Last salute as the gate creaked open. Jameson stepped aside, eyes reflecting pride and weariness. They marched past, rifles slung, heads held high. In their steady cadence, he heard an echo of every lesson shared. When the gate closed behind them, Jameson stood alone under the lingering clouds. He exhaled, letting the air fill his lungs with the scent of wet earth. He looked to the horizon, where a pale light hinted at sunrise. Tonight's salutes in the rain would become legend, a promise that honor stands unbroken when tested by storm and spirit. The morning sun broke through low clouds as the academy grounds stirred to life. Commander Jameson stood at the entrance to the courtyard, framed by the new Jameson Post sign. Cadets filed past him, each offering a crisp salute, a gesture once unthinkable from those who laughed at his uniform and notebook. Today, their eyes met his with unguarded respect. Lieutenant Carter approached, carrying a bound copy of Jameson's journal that bore a new cover, Worthington Military Academy's Manual of Vigilance. "We printed your notes," Carter said, voice steady. Every lesson, every margin sketch. Jameson accepted the volume and ran a finger over the title. Carter continued, effective immediately. This will guide our training and security protocols. The words carried the solemnity of a promise fulfilled. A line of cadets formed behind Carter. Arya Bennett stepped forward, holding a framed photograph of Jameson in his younger years, uniform crisp, medals shining. Sir, she said quietly, you once warned that honor cannot be requested. It must be earned. You've earned ours. She handed him the photograph. Jameson took it, noticing the tiny smudge near a medal ribbon where Arya had carefully touched the glass. It was more than a picture. It was a testament. The formation shifted, and Carter motioned them to attention. Today, we honor a guardian who taught us that leadership is earned in silence, revealed by action, and sealed by respect. Cadets echoed the phrase in unison, their voices crisp against the morning breeze. Jameson opened the journal to a blank page and scrawled 5 words: respect restored, vigilance reborn, legacy secured. He closed the book and looked up. Beyond the rows of cadets, generals, staff, and officers stood at ease, their uniforms immaculate, yet their expressions softened by newfound humility. As the ceremony ended, Jameson turned to leave. Cadets fell in behind him, marching in step as if guided by the steady cadence of his footsteps. Carter fell in beside him. Neither needed words. Their synchronized pace spoke of unity forged through trials, from sidewalk stops to midnight alerts and stormy salutes. At the gatehouse, Jameson paused to look across the perimeter he had safeguarded. Sensors blinked steadily. Cameras scanned methodically. Beyond the fences, the world churned with unknown threats. Yet here, inside these walls, something enduring had taken shape. A community bound by trust and respect. Lieutenant Carter lifted his cap in salute one final time. Jameson returned it with a nod and entered the booth. He placed the journal on the desk, now more symbol than tool, and picked up the walking stick resting by the door. Outside, cadets continued their drills under the watch of a quiet sentinel. As he stepped back into the morning light, notebook and photograph in hand, Jameson felt the weight of years lift slightly. Respect, once withheld, was now woven into every patrol, every salute, every silent choice made by those he had taught. Worthington Military Academy would carry that lesson. Forward, respect restored forever.